then hopscotched from a condemnation of partial birth abortion to a call for a law against human cloning, staking the state's claim to control corporeality in all its forms, from womb to cell. Divine might manifested as governmental jurisdiction over bodies. His voice was firm and his sentences flowed. Something was coming. Just after 9:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, he looked at the camera again. Today, on the continent of Africa, nearly 30 million people have the AIDS virus, including 3 million children under the age of 15, he said. I recognize the facts that were a catechism for me and many others working on global AIDS, an American neologism for the epidemic beyond U.S. borders. There are whole countries where more than 1/3 of the adult population carries the infection. More than 4 million require immediate drug treatment. Yet across that continent, only 50,000 AIDS victims, only 50,000, he repeated himself as we activists did in our own speeches, marveling at the inhumanity, are receiving the medicine they need. Bush continued. A doctor in rural South Africa describes his frustration. He says, "We have no medicines. Many hospitals tell people, 'You've got AIDS, we can't help you. Go home and die.'" In the age of miraculous medicines, no person should have to hear those words. Tonight, I propose the emergency plan for AIDS relief, a work of mercy beyond all current international efforts to help the people of Africa. This comprehensive plan will prevent 7 million new AIDS infections, treat at least 2 million people with life-extending drugs, and provide humane care for millions of people suffering from AIDS and for children orphaned by AIDS. I ask the Congress to commit $15 billion over the next 5 years, including nearly $10 billion in new money, to turn the tide against AIDS in the most afflicted nations of Africa and the Caribbean. His words ended years of American negligence. With a scant handful of sentences, Bush launched the largest disease-specific foreign aid effort in the history of the country and the world. He also brought to an end an era of shameful American heel-dragging over whether people in Africa living with HIV and dying of AIDS deserved access to the medications that had changed HIV from a death sentence to a chronic disease in people who could afford them. In the years to come, members of Congress would call the president's plan the most effective American foreign aid since the Marshall Plan, the legendary post-World War II effort to rebuild Europe and head off Soviet alliances. The program that would be known as the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, would meet the goals Bush set in the State of the Union ahead of schedule and go on hitting or surpassing them across 3 presidential administrations and 8 Congresses. That night, Bush laid out his vision for one war that would maim and another one that would heal. One lethal and ill-fated, the other surprisingly adept at saving lives. Americans would become all too familiar with the death and destruction caused by the War on Terror. The Plague War would receive far less notice. 10 years after its launch, Nobel laureate Harold Varmus declared with surprise that few Americans understand how successful the PEPFAR has been and how it was conceived and carried out. In subsequent years, assessments of Bush's presidency would cite the AIDS war as his primary positive achievement, sometimes with gotcha headlines like, "George W. Bush was a much better president than liberals like to admit." Such stories suggested that the program's most salient feature was its surprising progenitor and obscured the extent to which Bush's work of mercy was also a feat of engineering, of policies, attitudes, activist strategies, and public health programs. The COVID-19 pandemic that began in 2020 made it clear that the country could ill afford this mischaracterization. Even with compromises that put cracks in its foundation, PEPFAR is America's most sustained and effective fight against a pandemic of the 21st century. An unprecedented achievement in promoting public health instead of public death, it offers lessons in how the U.S. government can organize and implement a long-term plague war. We who worked on AIDS knew none of this that night, but we did know that while a virus can cause illness, it is human actions that allow the virus first to spread until it inhabits enough bodies that an outbreak has occurred, and then to continue to spread until its presence has reached epidemic or pandemic proportions. We knew that the actions that fueled the epidemic were not condomless sex acts or shared syringes, but the laws passed and stigma dispensed by members of society.